Here we are. Hi, everyone. If you haven't met me, I'm David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery. I'm also the person that looks after Art Forum. And before I introduce our guest speaker, please join me in the deep knowledge that long before this institution was considered, that the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people for thousands of generations practiced song and dance here, that they made paintings and sculptures, practiced healing, shared stories, and those rituals and traditions continue today. Please join me with joy and honour in acknowledging their elders past, present, and those yet to come. June, there's a slight echo on this. Is that because it's just a little bit loud? This is June, by the way. She's really the boss. Let's have a try. Oh, that's so much better. There we are. Thank you, June. Our guest speaker, Sasha Huber. Sasha Huber, have I said that correctly? Great. Is a Helsinki-based visual artist researcher of Swiss and Haitian heritage. Sasha's work is concerned with the politics of memory, care, and belonging in relation to colonial residues left in the environment. Connecting history and the present, she uses and responds to archival material within a layered creative practice that encompasses performance-based reparative interventions, video, photography, and collaborations. Sasha also usurps the staple gun, aware of its symbolic significance as a weapon, while offering the potential to renegotiate unequal power dynamics and the possibility of repair, symbolically stitching colonial wounds together. She holds an MA in visual culture from Aalto University in Helsinki and is presently undertaking a practice-based PhD in artistic research at the Zurich University of the Arts. Sasha also works in a creative partnership with visual artist Petri Sariko. From 2021 to 2024, her work has been touring under the title You Name It, which was circulated by the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery in Toronto. Sasha's work is also included in the exhibition. Oh my goodness, I've got it. Hang on. Tell me if I'm pronouncing it properly. I'm so sorry. Can you say it, Kim? Acropusculum, thank you, which means twilight, thank you. And it's at Project 8 and it opens this Friday evening. Whether you're in Zoom land or whether you're here with us in Federation Hall, please make Sasha very, very welcome.
Thank you for the invitation to be here, Sean and Kim, David. And I too would like to today start with acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people, traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. I'm really happy to be back here. I was 10 years ago at the Sydney Biennale, and that's when my relationship with Australia and also Aotearoa, New Zealand started. And today I would like to introduce you to some of my early works, and one of the works that you will see at the exhibition space at Project 8, but then also a long-term project that I've been working on since 2008. And this image is from this project. The starting point for my artistic practice was very much informed by my mother's heritage, which is Haiti. She met my father in New York in the 70s after she has moved from Haiti to New York because of the dictatorship. And then they moved to Switzerland, and that's where I was born. You see here on the right side, my mother's family, just before they moved to the States, and my grandfather is holding my aunt on his arms, and he was a painter as well. As you see on the left side, it's an old photograph that I found of him with his friends who started the art school Le Centre d'Art in Haiti that is still existing. It was in 1944. And it was always important for me to be in New York with the family and learn from my grandfather. And it was also him whom I showed my early works. My background as a start is in graphic design, what I studied in Switzerland. But then I went to Italy to a place called Fabrica. It's a research and design center by Benetton, 2001. And there I was in the graphic design department still. And that is where I met Petri, my partner, who's from Finland. And more or less from that time, I moved to Finland, and there I made my master's studies in still graphic design, visual culture. And it's there where I started to work with the staple gun. I don't know anymore why I had the idea to take this tool into my hands, but I did. And I tasted it out, and I realized that it really feels like a weapon, the weight, the sound of it, and so on. And it was a moment in time where I wanted to visit my Haitian family that remained there, and my mother would say again, no, don't go, it's too dangerous. And her worry was justified, but still I always wanted to go, and I ended up going there in 2011. But in 2004, it somehow came together with discovering this method of shooting with this staple gun. And I decided to learn more about the Haitian history. Why is it as it is? And I decided to use this tool to shoot back at individuals that were responsible of the troubles in Haiti. So it was important for me to staple and shoot back at Christopher Columbus as a kind of a starting point. He who got lost in the Caribbean. And then I portrayed also the Duvalier, the dictators who affected my family directly, who were the reasons also for several to leave the country. And this is Papadoc Duvalier. He was saying that God chose him to be president for life, and that's why this kind of halo is around his head. And in 71, when he died, his only 19-year-old son had to exceed his presidency or dictatorship, and he was only, that's why he was called Baby Doc. And in the background, you see all many numbers or many countings that for me symbolized the many victims that came out of this really difficult time in Haiti. And so the shooting really was for me a way of responding to this history, to this unjust history, and felt for me like a way of how I can do this. But what I realized, I create images of men that have on one hand been written down in history, men who did so much harm. And I continue doing some more portraits in the same way, these shooting back portraits. But then I realized that I want to use my energy more in telling stories of people that were silenced, that were not talked about, that were not written down in history. And so this shooting back developed more in a way of stitching the colonial wound. So I made, for example, this work, Sea of the Lost, which commemorates people that didn't survive the Middle Passage, over 2 million people. But it also thinks about the so-called Mediterranean Middle Passage that is in our lifetimes now, that people have to cross the waters in precarious ways. Another portraiture series is this Shooting Star series that I started 2014, which is ongoing, which is dedicated to people that were victims of assassination and killing for political reasons, but for environmental reasons, hate crime reasons, and so forth. And from history to the present, and the starting point were civil rights movement leaders like Martin Luther King, for example. But I also portrayed, for example, Reza Barati. I showed this particularly because he was a refugee seeker, as an asylum seeker, and who was killed during a uproar in the Manus Island. and is for me also a way of remembering people and their stories. And here it was made in a way that I stapled first, and then I laid silver on top. And this silver kind of created a way of, it became like a mirror. So when you would look at the work, you kind of see your outlines as well. And for me, it was a way of reflecting back at the person who is looking at this series. And this has been ongoing, and many times when I have exhibitions in particular places, I extend this series. Another series which is ongoing is called The Firsts. It's a portraiture series of people from the African diaspora that arrived in Europe in the 19th and 20th century. But then it also is remembering and introducing people in our lifetimes from the African diaspora who achieve certain positions in society as the first Black person. And it's so, in a way, still possible in many fields. And I'm creating this archive of introducing these people. And James Baldwin, he was in Switzerland doing 51 and 53, working on his first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain. And I visited this village 2016 for the first time. And I got to know the owner of the house that he inhabited periodically. It was a house that was owned by his partner's family. Lucien Happersberger, he was a painter, and they met in Paris at the time, and he offered him this opportunity to go to work there in peace, away from the hassle in Paris. And this is also the place where he wrote Stranger in the Village, which I really recommend you to read. He speaks there about his experience as one of the first Black people in this small village, but never seen a Black person before. And he was there with his typewriter and waking up the lady below, not knowing what is this sound. And he found out it's the only typewriter in the whole village. And I, for me, wanted to make this portrait of James Baldwin in the public space. This is there since 2018. I also contacted the New York, the estate of James Baldwin before I started the work. I wanted them to know about this. And so I made his portrait there as a way of making his presence visible, because the village, for example, didn't have any official kind of acknowledgement of his time in Leukebad. And now this year, tomorrow is his 100-year birthday celebrated everywhere. And I took this as a opportunity to make another edition of rubbings of the work. This is for me also a way of how I can bring the work further, because I don't want to remove the work. And I've been in touch with Daniel Browning for many years. We met during an exhibition project 2015 here in Australia, and he loves James Baldwin. And we've been in touch recently, and I asked him if he would like to write an essay about my exhibition, my project here at Project 8. And so this is the poster that you can take along when you come to the exhibition. This is just a preview, a sneak peek of the show that you will see here at Project 8, which I have together with Petri Saarikko, who's also my partner. And his work I don't show, but you have to come and see. Together with him, we've been having a joint project called Remedies Universe since 2010, where we travel to different residencies, and now also being more and more invited, which is about the oral family knowledge. And in 2010, we did a project in Mildura. This is just a still from the film. And he has his own practice as well. So now I would like to start with the long-term project, which started basically after reading this book about Swiss involvement in slavery and slave trade, something we didn't learn at school. And Hans Fassler, the writer of this book, which was at the time maybe the third book about this topic, also the Swiss involvement in colonialism, something most people don't know about because we didn't have a colony as many other countries, but we did have many colonists, and that contributed to the wealth of Switzerland still today. And Hans Fassler, he wrote this book, and I decided to contact him after that. I wanted to show him the Shooting Back series, also because Haiti plays a role in his book. And since then, we know each other. He's a historian and activist from Switzerland. And in 2006, we met for the first time. And from that time on, he started to, share with me his activities. In 2007, he founded the cultural activist campaign, The Mounting Louis Agassiz. And Louis Agassiz was a Swiss-born glaciologist and known quite around the world, and especially when he moved to the States in 1846. And what happened there is so that he then saw Black people who in many places, and that was new for him. And he developed in becoming one of the most influential racists of the 19th century. And that history was not shared during the 2007 celebrations of his 200-year birthday. And Hans Fassler noticed that this part of his history was left out. And his idea was to rename one of the mountains in the Swiss Alps called Agassiz. There are over 80 places around the world named after him, even on the Moon and Mars. And in relation to Australia, there is a fish called Agassiz that is endemic to Australia. And the idea was ever to rename one of the mountains in the Swiss Alps, which is on the border between Bern, the canton Bern and Wallis, and to rename it in Renti. And Renti was a Congolese-born man who was enslaved on a South Carolina plantation. And Agassiz commissioned the photographer Joseph Seeley to photograph Renti, his daughter, and 5 further individuals without clothes. And that was the 1850, when the technology of photography was still new. And I felt, so he invited me to be part of the committee to support this renaming. And I felt I needed to do more about this than just give my name. And this is how I started to engage with this idea of renaming physically. And that was the first time where I created a reparative intervention. I will show this in this way. I made a sign with a new name, and I made a drawing of Renti and the reason why this mountain should be renamed. And I decided to go to the mountain and physically, symbolically, but physically rename it instead of waiting for the area to make a decision. Even today, the mountain has never been renamed. We made 4 attempts, and the last one was 2020 when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, so many, many years later, and still they didn't want to rename the mountain. But it did start the conversation about Agassiz's history very well, so over the years, and there have happened some renamings meanwhile. So I made this intervention and it became a video work. I also started a petition website, which is still online, where people could also write reasons why they think it should be renamed, the mountain. And I made a drawing of Renti dressed back on, because I felt how it must have, I could imagine how it must have felt humiliating to undress in front of these strangers when those daguerreotypes were made, standing in front of this box, not knowing actually what's maybe coming out of it. And people were photographed in all the, from the sides, so frontal side and back. And so I decided to make this drawing. And much later, I revisited this idea of kind of giving dignity back with clothing. I will show you this later. But this is the installation. There were also letters written to all the mayors to explain the reason why we would suggest to rename the mountain. We also sent the letters to the UNESCO World Nature Heritage committee. And Kofi Annan, for example, was one of the committee members, and he and others sent answers back. And in his case, he was wishing good luck, so he didn't really, couldn't really do more. And then 4 years later, I got an email by Tamara Lanier, the woman on the left side. And she said she's she's a descendant of Renti. So she's the great-great-great-grandmother of daughter of Renti. And her daughters surrounding her found my petition website when they were researching. And they came to Switzerland, and she could speak about Renti and giving him this humanity back that was stripped from him, literally. And she could say, for example, that he was able to read something that was forbidden for enslaved people. And that was really important. We also tried to invite Agassiz descendants. They were not interested at all. They were really against somehow this whole demounting Agassiz campaign. So they didn't come. And much later, I met Tamara again in the States, and I made this portrait. And in 2019, she filed a lawsuit against Harvard University against the ownership of these photographs of her ancestor, and in relation to reparation as well. So this story was then publicized in different in newspapers and New York Times. And then what happened is that the descendants of Agassiz in the States, because he started a new family in the States when he moved there in 1846, came forward to Tamara. So the great-great-great-granddaughter of Agassiz contacted Tamara and asked if they could support her in this situation. And they wrote an open letter that was then presented in June 2019. And Petri was then there and made a film about it, so we could document it. And that was also then part of this body of work with the permission of Tamara. So it was the first time where families from both sides kind of came together. Unfortunately, the letter didn't help either, and this is still ongoing, this case. First part was that it was dismissed, and then later it went further. Benjamin Crumb was her lawyer who offered her to help her. He's the one, for example, who represented George Floyd's family as well. So he's extremely active and important. And as I mentioned before, I revisited the idea of clothing, using clothing as a way of giving dignity back. And I then made this work, Tailoring Freedom, where I, for the first time, married photography with this stapling, this stitching method. And I portrayed Renti and his daughter in this way. And the clothes, the suit of Renti is borrowed from a photograph I looked at from Frederick Douglass, who was an abolitionist who was enslaved and able to become free in his lifetime. And the dress of Delia is a dress that I found from a photograph of Harriet Tubman, who was similarly an abolitionist and a formerly enslaved woman. And for me, using this clothing represented freedom that was not, that Renti and Delia and the other 5 individuals didn't gain in their lifetime. And I felt it was important to also think about the other 5 people who don't have descendants now who fight for their freedom. So I decided to portray everybody in this way. Her dress, Drana, this is Jack and Drana, father-daughter. And Drana's dress is inspired by a photograph of Sojourner Truth. And this is the whole series as it now has been shown as part of this You Name It exhibition that ended in Switzerland. So it was a tour that ended now this year in Switzerland. So it kind of the circle closed. After the Rentihorn project, I didn't know that this project will continue, that this will go on for so long, but it did. And the next place for me to go was Brazil. He led an expedition there in 1865-66 for 1 whole year. He did several works there, but one was to extend this photographic archive and produced with photographers in Rio and Manaus, 200 photographs. And I got to work with the history professor Maria Helena Machado from Sao Paulo, and she has worked with this photographic archive in the past and asked me if I would like to collaborate and if I would be interested to respond to this archive. And so I decided to start this series, this slowly growing series called Mixed Traces, where I visited different sites around the world named after Agassiz and use my own body instead of the body, the original photographs that were made of people who didn't have a choice and couldn't say no. So me as a racialized person, I decided to stand in and as a way of reclaiming the body and in relation also to the land that I felt has been occupied and colonized. So this is another place in Switzerland where his hometown is, Montvully. On this Agassiz rock, there's even his name written in red. And this is in Scotland, Agassiz rock, near Edinburgh. This is in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This big mountain is the Agassiz Range. When the crown arrived to Aotearoa, they sent a man called Julius von Haast to travel the land and find natural resources. And during this journey, he renamed and named over 100 places after Europeans, after himself, Agassiz, and so on, without acknowledging the Maori names that were there in some parts. This is in Canada. In Canada, are very many places called Agassiz. This was in New York, in the Bronx Park, waterfalls. On the island, Agassiz Island in Canada. And last year, I was in Alaska at the Agassiz Glacier and lakes. And there I also realized a new reparative intervention in collaboration with Tlingit peoples. This is just an overview. I also made an intervention at the Praça Agassiz, Agassiz Square in Rio. People didn't know who was Agassiz, and so I had the idea to be like a messenger who explains people who he was and what he did there. And then in response to that, people were telling that the square, Praça Agassiz Square, is really unsafe and there happened many accidents and they've been trying to get the city to make it more safe. And after this story, they would like to also rename it. So it was their idea to follow up. And I was able to produce this book together with Maria Helena, including those photographs and put them in context. As a series, only 40 we could select. And that is the work, the Karakia resetting ceremony made in Aotearoa together with Jeff Mahuika from the Naitahu tribe. An ancestor of his was guiding this Julius von Haast around at the time. So it was really important to collaborate, because in Switzerland I could work by myself because I'm from there, but in other countries I always collaborate with indigenous peoples. During that time I also started this poster series. The first one was made 2015, a takeaway poster basically. It was in memory of the 9 African Americans who've been killed by a racist during the church service at the time when this exhibition opened, also in the same time. And I wanted to do this poster because Agassiz also was in Charleston where this incident happened. And it was a kind of a link between the past and the present, because I'm interested in what is the root of this racism that there is today still, and he's one of those persons who really teach that. And there is an example of what he taught on the poster that is not really visible now, and the Agassiz Down Under was the name of the show, and this photograph of archive is showing an incident that happened in 1906 during the earthquake in California. So Agassiz sculpture just dropped down. This is not Photoshop. And it was for some reason documented from different angles. And I felt this is a perfect image, because also Australia is a very earthquake prone country. And yeah, geographically down under as here as well. And then was a collaboration with throat singers in Canada, a film. Unfortunately, I cannot show any films. And then I was interested also in the space, in the places named after Agassiz. And I got to collaborate and work with the Katherine Johnson family. She was a NASA mathematician, and she was still alive, 2018, but very, very old, almost 100 years old. And my dream was to rename the Agassiz Promotorium on the moon after her. But with Hans Fassler and Hans Barth, an other committee member, we've been contacting the IAU, International Astronomy Union, about this, and they were not interested. They don't want to change anything. And the last reparative intervention I made last year in Alaska, together with Jeremiah, is the first place I visited where there are two places named after this Agassiz, and they are now developing new names and want to rename these places. And as mentioned earlier in the introduction, the whole body of work is now brought together in this group, in this exhibition tour that now ended. And this shows just a couple of stills. In autograph, it was on the left. This in Switzerland, and now, yeah, this is in Switzerland. Here, overview. The plan now is to continue the work in Alaska, and the Tailoring Freedom series is also continuing. And the book was published recently, which is a really amazing resource, because several texts were written especially for the book. Thank you. I'm not sure how long did I talk? Yeah, perfect. Is it okay? Not too long?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just going to get some lights on.
For questions.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you so much for taking us through that. I mean, the projects are so rich and they're so, you know, they're just everywhere. And it's like there's no place that the reverberations of colonization doesn't impact. So thank you for the work that you do. We've got time for some questions, and I wonder if anybody's got a question for Sasha.
Also online, how do you do it? If anyone wants, if anyone is there, I don't know. But yes.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I've got a question, and I can't remember the name of the work. It was one of the staple works, but it was positioned outside, in like a.
Oh, the James Baldwin.
That's portrait. Right, the James Baldwin. And I just wondered about that work and where you, well, just that work outdoors. Like, it's kept outdoors, it's pretty extreme, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about showing a work like that in that context versus the tour, like more museum-based setup.
Yeah, so this is like a own initiative, firstly. And previously I was 2017 in Canada in a residency, and there I made a portrait also outside for the first time that was, and it was called, the series called, it was supposed to become a series, but it was one portrait called You Are Missed, and it is about all the many missed and murdered Indigenous women over there. And I didn't know at the time yet that this is a really huge problem over there. And I wanted to make portraits of those women with the staples in the public space on those wooden poles that often carry a message like somebody's missed. But as soon the paper is gone, what remains are those staples in a big mess, and you don't know anymore what was the news there. But the people that were missed there will never be forgotten by their families and friends. So it was a way of, kind of making them visible in the public space and like in a permanent way. And I want to do this similarly with James Baldwin's portrait, which is slowly changing, as you can imagine. So nowadays it's the shoulder, the right shoulder is a bit more rusty. So slowly it will kind of blend into this wood, this old building. And now there was because of his 100-year birthday, a literature festival since 28 years in this village. And they invited me this time to bring the audience to this place because it's not really easy to find and there are no signages and so on. So we went there and yeah, so it was interesting to see how slowly more and more people know it and also now go to visit him in this way. And yeah, in this case, it was made really much sense that so otherwise the first series is made on 1 meter square board made of acoustic board, compressed acoustic board, which is a material that you use usually to mute sound in space. And that was for me a way of related to the histories that have been muted and have not so been heard. So those are more works that can be shown inside and as part of this, you name it. There has been, I made a portrait of Katherine Johnson, for example, and I made a portrait of, that was shown now in the You Name It exhibition. And when the exhibition was in London, there was a portrait of Thilo Frey, the first Thilo Frey, and she was a Cameroonian Swiss politician. And she was one of the first women and women of color in the time when only 1971 where women were allowed to be in the in the politics and becoming ministers. So she was in this group and I wanted to highlight her because also she's from Neuchâtel, the same place where Agassiz is from. And in front of the university there was a L'espace Agassiz, and this L'espace Agassiz became 2019 L'espace Thilo Frey. And this was really quickly, this happened in a way, and also because this Demounting Louis Agassiz campaign has always, Hans Fassler has been using every occasion to publicize about it again and again. So it was really also thanks to this engagement that the idea came, let's rename this place rather than find a new name, because at that time there was no place commemorating Thilo Frey at the time. So yeah, it's important to see this as a work that needs persistence and duration. It's something that doesn't go from one day to the other. So it's really dedicating. Thank you.
Someone else? Question here, please.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's at the beginning when I was talking about this shift of this methodology, where I felt the shooting back or the more the violent part that is still there in a way, because it is painful also, this kind of there's the subjects and the themes, they are there's this violence there still, but in a different way. And it also was about what happens to my own body when I do this as a phenomenologically as well. What happens, the repetitiveness, and it is pain there, like physically as well. But it was really important to shift this because it's so slow, the work, and also looking at the work and so on. It was very important to move away from the maybe not the violence, but more of, you know, visualize people who did the actual damage, and they're not giving them more space as well. So that was very important to shift that. And but it was at that time when I started, it was writing for me, and already from that time on, from a kind of decolonial perspective, this portrait of Columbus, still a time where Columbus Day was still celebrated and is now hopefully slowly replaced, and thinking also in the situation of here, you know, that the day of when colonization started is a day of celebration here in this land. This is so doesn't make sense somehow if one would think in like common sense almost. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Hello. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, and I think the possibility for me to be in such a space, it's a huge privilege. Also, I understand that as well. It's not everybody can do this, and you know, move around freely. It is very another big subject as well. But being able to have a shared history, it allows to be able to connect and work together as well, because I somehow go to these places and want to highlight, but also highlight this dark history that came from Switzerland and help to remove it again. And because of that order, it's been always really possible to collaborate with people. And maybe that's also why it's been going on as well, because it's kind of like has a ripple effect as well. Yeah. Hello. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, that is a good question, because when the campaign was founded, it was 2007. It was quite a new, that hasn't happened before, that kind of suggestion to rename a mountain. Now there are much more these kind of activities happening. So by the time I made the intervention, there was already knowledge about it, and so people reacted relatively strong in the media, saying like, why should that be changed? If we change this, then we also have to change others. That's oftentimes as well, that's happened as well. But unfortunately, it also, or not unfortunately, but it happened that also people from the right-wing sides picked up this information, because I put my face out there at that point. And Hans was, for example, saying it's good that I'm not living here at the moment, because they were like, you know, discussing this online, and I didn't really Google it myself. But there was, yeah. But then there was also positive reactions of people who really wanted to know more about it. For example, one of the mayors was quite open and didn't know about it, and said that's the photographs I could show of us standing in Grindelwald. It's because he offered the opportunity to make an exhibition about this agassiz racism that people didn't know about. But the thing is, since the mountain was located on a border between 2 cantons and 3 communes, everybody would have had to say yes. And that was, yeah, one of the other mayors, he said, we don't have any Black people in the mountains. They have no merits here. Why should a mountain be named after an African man? We, at some point, also suggested different names of people, but they said basically no for everybody, also saying, for example, that other features are not named after people. So we don't want to have another human. Yeah, and so, and also in the petition website, there were mostly people from Switzerland responding, but meanwhile, there are over 70 out of 70 countries, people left their name or also sentence there why they think it's important. And so this really has become a kind of an archive of itself, of its own, this website where you can read of people's reactions. But in the newspaper reactions, there are just always these people who say, yeah, there are more important things to deal with and get over it. And why do we need to talk about this? So this is something that is a problem here also, that like, oh, get over it and so on. But for me, it connects. History is really, like James Baldwin also says, like, history is not the past, it's the present. We are the history. We are part of this now. And you can, and also one person was writing in the petition website that history is not fixed. You can renegotiate that history. And that I found really, it's really true. And also being able to certainly being contacted by a descendant of this Renti, that was something I couldn't have find her, or I couldn't have anticipated this. And so it's really alive all the time. So I think people who are negative about it, they maybe are not open to that side of how history can be renegotiated. And it's not about blaming anyone or anything, but it's about just speak it and acknowledge it. And, you know, even people now, we were not there before, but those who were there before, we are a representation of those who were there before. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So that's kind of this manifestation into the present, actually. Thank you.
One more question. Yeah.
Yeah. Also the photographs. But in New Zealand, for example, I collaborated with, I was with Petri in the Te Wharehera residency, maybe you know it, with the Massey University. And there I was introduced to different people, and Miranda Bellamy it has filmed, and she's also an artist herself, and photographs of the Mixed Traces series were always by other artists or photographers. And yeah, that collaborative work is really important. My partner also, Petri, has helped me with producing lots of the works. And yeah, nothing is done alone ever. So it's really a good question and important to say. The staple works, those I do myself. This is somehow the work I can do in the studio, and it's kind of slow work, but everything outside is always collaborative. And also with this Hans Fassler, I've been always collaborating. He's my historical advisor also, and he's been doing so important work for a reckoning of Switzerland's history. And nowadays, locally, there are more people and younger researchers working on highlighting and shedding light into this history that's been so long really on the radar. Switzerland has been really very slow. Even it's on the hand that there was an involvement, and in the textile industry, for example, and so on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. Yeah, so you cannot read it, of course, here, but I just want to invite you to come and get your copy. It's been an honor to have him reflect on the work and how our histories have connected together as well. He has also roots in the Caribbean, for example, and he just published a book recently that I really recommend you, close to the subject. And tomorrow he will come to the opening. So if you want to meet Daniel as well and take one of the posters along, he really contextualized the work, my work that is now freshly made for this exhibition to the local history and situation, because my work is called Land Back Now and SOS, and you will see, you saw already one image. It's written in the Morse code, so it's kind of secret, but it's not secret, and it also relates to the history of Morse, but then also my personal history. My grandfather from Haiti was an amateur radio person, and it's a childhood memory as well that comes into play, and the sound relates then again to Daniel, who works with sound a lot. So it was kind of a weaving together of our histories. Yeah, and here is Kim and Sean, who curated our exhibition, Curate. And thank you again for that and for the invitation here. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Sasha, for your generosity, and just congratulations on the work and you've accomplished. Please join me in thanking Sasha.
Thank you.